What if an ancient prophecy holds the key to understanding our future? What if a prophet, exiled and isolated, foresaw events that still echo through our world today? Welcome to Sacred Path Reflections, where today we'll explore the haunting, powerful visions of the prophet Ezekiel, a man whose prophecies have shaped the beliefs of millions and may reveal insights into what lies ahead for humanity. Ezekiel's name means God will strengthen or God will prevail. But this wasn't just a title, it was a mission. He was more than just a prophet. He was a priest, a watchman, called to bear messages of both devastating warnings and unshakable hope. Exiled in Babylon, Ezekiel found himself delivering messages that would not only resonate with the people of his time but would ripple across centuries. Why was he chosen for this role, and what exactly did he see in those profound visions? Join us as we journey through his prophecies, from the mysteries of Israel's restoration to the apocalyptic battle of Gog and Magog, to uncover what Ezekiel's words might reveal about the future of Israel and the fate of the world. Ezekiel's story begins in captivity, far from his homeland, with visions as vivid as they were ominous. At the age of 30, a milestone year when he would have been fully recognized as a priest, he instead received a calling to serve as a prophet. But this wasn't any ordinary calling. It was a mission that would span 22 years and push him to the limits of endurance, faith, and resilience. Ezekiel's role was that of a watchman, a term that carried immense weight. In ancient Israel, a watchman was responsible for sounding the alarm, warning of any approaching danger. But Ezekiel's warnings weren't just about physical threats. His visions held messages that spoke to the very soul of a nation. He was tasked with confronting the people of Judah and Jerusalem, calling them to account for their disobedience and corruption, urging them to turn back to God before it was too late. Why Judah and Jerusalem specifically? By this time, the people of Israel had split into two kingdoms. While the northern kingdom of Israel had already fallen to Assyria, the southern kingdom of Judah, home to Jerusalem, remained. But Ezekiel's message was clear. Judah and Jerusalem were on a path of destruction unless they changed. Ezekiel wasn't just warning about an invading army. He was painting a picture of spiritual decay and the judgment that would inevitably follow. Through visions that were both symbolic and terrifying, Ezekiel became the voice no one wanted to hear. Yet, his role as a watchman was a calling he could not refuse. And as we'll see, his prophecies went far beyond his own time, pointing to events yet to unfold. To understand the weight of Ezekiel's prophecies, we need to grasp the divide between the house of Israel and the house of Judah. By Ezekiel's time, Israel wasn't a united kingdom. After King Solomon's reign, a fracture split the 12 tribes. The 10 tribes of the northern kingdom became known as Israel, while the 2 tribes in the south, Judah and Benjamin, along with part of Levi, formed the kingdom of Judah, centered in Jerusalem. The northern kingdom, or Israel, had already faced its downfall. They were conquered by Assyria and scattered, becoming what some now refer to as the lost tribes of Israel. Meanwhile, the southern kingdom of Judah persisted, but they were caught in a cycle of idolatry, disobedience, and corruption. They clung to the notion that Jerusalem, the city where God's temple stood, would protect them. But Ezekiel's message shattered that illusion. Ezekiel spoke directly to Judah and Jerusalem, warning them that they were on the brink of disaster. He made it clear that being the last standing part of Israel didn't grant them immunity. The very presence of the temple wouldn't save them from judgment. This wasn't just about survival. It was about the soul of a nation, a people who had drifted so far from their purpose that drastic intervention was the only way forward. In his messages, Ezekiel often distinguished between the house of Israel and the house of Judah. This separation wasn't just political, it was spiritual. While Israel and Judah shared a common heritage, their paths and their fates had diverged. Through Ezekiel, God addressed each house differently, pointing out their distinct sins and calling each to accountability in unique ways. But what's fascinating is that Ezekiel's words don't just address the past. Many believe his prophecies echo through history, speaking not only to the ancient Israelites but to the fate of modern nations and perhaps to our own spiritual condition. In his warnings to Israel and Judah, there lies a challenge, one that urges each generation to examine its values, its loyalties, and its connection to the divine. Ezekiel's prophecies weren't just words. They were living symbols, actions that carried the weight of his warnings. He was commanded to do things that would be impossible to ignore, a series of strange and striking acts that each carried a powerful message about Israel's fate. These symbolic actions made him a visible, undeniable reminder of what lay ahead if the people didn't turn back to God. One of the most notable of these actions was when Ezekiel was instructed to lie on his side. For 390 days, he lay on his left side, symbolizing the years of punishment for the house of Israel. Then he lay on his right side for 40 days, representing the punishment for the house of Judah. Each day he spent in this position represented a year of sin and rebellion, a shocking display meant to call the people's attention to the seriousness of their actions. But that wasn't all. Ezekiel was also told to prepare a meager meal, cooking his food over a fire of burning cow dung. This act symbolized the scarcity and desperation the people would face during the siege of Jerusalem. It was a picture of deprivation, a stark contrast to the comfort and prosperity they had come to expect. The message was clear: if they continued down this path, their way of life would be utterly disrupted, replaced by a harsh reality they couldn't avoid. In chapter 5, Ezekiel delivered perhaps one of his most severe messages. He was commanded to shave his head and beard, something shocking for a priest, as priests were expected to keep their hair. He then divided the hair into 3 parts representing the people. 1/3 he burned in the city, symbolizing those who would die in the siege. Another 1/3 he struck with a sword, a sign of those who would fall in battle. And the last 1/3 he scattered to the wind, showing those who would be taken into exile. Each action was a powerful visual warning of the famine, pestilence, war and captivity that would soon befall Jerusalem. Ezekiel's symbolic acts were extreme, but they were meant to wake up a people who had grown spiritually complacent. His actions were physical embodiments of the consequences of idolatry, corruption, and turning away from God. These weren't empty rituals. They were warnings that left no room for doubt, confrontations with the harsh truth that judgment was near. Yet, as harsh as these actions were, they carried a purpose beyond punishment. They were a call to repentance, an urgent plea for the people to return to God before it was too late. But would they listen? And what lessons could these actions hold for us today? Ezekiel's prophecies don't just focus on his own time. Many of his visions reach far beyond, hinting at events that some believe point to our own future. This concept of dual fulfillment is key to understanding Ezekiel's prophecies. It means that some of his visions were fulfilled in his lifetime or shortly after, while others might have echoes that carry into the end times, impacting generations to come. One of the most intense and ominous visions is what Ezekiel describes as the day of the Lord's wrath. In these passages, Ezekiel sees a time of great turmoil and judgment, a period when God's anger is unleashed on a world that has turned away from him. The day of the Lord is described not just by Ezekiel but by other prophets as well, as a time when the world will face divine justice before a new era of peace is ushered in. But this isn't a simple tale of destruction. In the midst of these warnings, Ezekiel speaks of hope, a restoration that would follow the judgment. This restoration centers around the promise of a renewed Israel, a vision of a people restored to their land and to their purpose. In chapters 34 through 37, Ezekiel describes a future where God's people are brought back from exile, where they are healed and united as one. This vision of restoration is powerfully captured in one of Ezekiel's most famous prophecies, the Valley of Dry Bones. In this vision, Ezekiel sees a valley filled with dry, lifeless bones, scattered and abandoned. God commands Ezekiel to prophesy to the bones, and as he speaks, the bones begin to rattle, come together, and are covered with flesh. But they still lack life. Then God commands the breath to enter them, and suddenly the bones are alive, standing as a great army. This vision is a powerful symbol of spiritual revival, a promise that even when a people seem utterly lost, God can breathe life back into them. Many see the Valley of Dry Bones as a symbol of Israel's rebirth as a nation, a prophecy that found new relevance with the establishment of the modern state of Israel. But it also speaks to a broader spiritual truth, one that goes beyond a single nation. It's a vision that reminds us that no situation is too hopeless for God to intervene. Just as the bones were restored to life, Ezekiel's prophecy suggests that any people, even in the bleakest circumstances, can experience renewal through God's Spirit. Another aspect of Ezekiel's end-time prophecies is the return of a leader from the line of David. This figure, often seen as a reference to the Messiah, is described as a shepherd who will guide God's people with wisdom and justice. This leader will bring unity and peace, ending the conflicts that have plagued humanity. In Ezekiel's vision, this leader is both a ruler and a servant, embodying qualities that set him apart from any earthly king. Ezekiel's prophecies about the end times also hint at a massive, climactic battle, a confrontation between good and evil that will shape the destiny of nations. We'll explore this battle, often referred to as the Battle of Gog and Magog, in more detail later, but it's worth noting that Ezekiel's vision of the end times is not a vision of endless destruction. Instead, it's a vision of judgment followed by restoration, of a world transformed by God's presence. In a world filled with conflict and uncertainty, Ezekiel's end-time prophecies offer both a warning and a promise. The warning is clear: there is a day of reckoning for those who reject God and turn to corruption and violence. But the promise is just as powerful. For those who seek God and remain faithful, there is a vision of peace, unity, and spiritual renewal that lies beyond the trials. Ezekiel's words were written for a people in exile, a people who had lost everything, yet they speak to a hope that transcends time. His prophecies call us to reflect on our own lives, our own society, and our own relationship with the divine. Are we prepared for the day of the Lord, or have we become complacent, assuming we can live as we please without consequence? And more importantly, do we recognize the promise of restoration that Ezekiel offers, a vision of a world healed, renewed, and brought back to life? One of the most powerful and mysterious images in Ezekiel's prophecies is the vision of the Valley of Dry Bones. Imagine a vast, barren valley filled with bones scattered everywhere, a place of desolation and lifelessness. This scene captures the heart of a people who have lost hope, who feel utterly disconnected from their purpose and from God. And yet, in the middle of this desolation, Ezekiel receives a command to speak to these bones. As Ezekiel begins to prophesy, something remarkable happens. The bones start to move, coming together to form skeletons. Flesh and skin cover them, but even then they remain lifeless. It's only when the breath of God enters them that they come fully to life, standing as a vast army. This is more than just a miraculous vision. It's a message that God's Spirit has the power to bring life back to the most hopeless situations. For many, this vision symbolizes the restoration of Israel as a nation, a prophecy of revival that seemed impossible after centuries of exile and dispersion. The image of dry bones coming to life resonates with the story of Israel, a people who, despite being scattered and nearly destroyed, would eventually be brought back to their land and their purpose. But this prophecy is not limited to one historical event. It's a spiritual truth, a reminder that no matter how far gone a situation may seem, God's Spirit can bring renewal and transformation. The Valley of Dry Bones also speaks to personal and communal revival. It's a vision that reminds us that even when we feel spiritually empty or disconnected, we can be restored. Ezekiel's prophecy challenges us to reflect on the dry bones in our own lives, the parts of ourselves or our communities that feel lifeless or broken. Through this vision, we see a powerful promise. God's Spirit has the power to breathe life into anything that seems lost. The concept of spiritual revival goes beyond physical restoration. It's about an awakening, a return to purpose, and a renewed connection to the divine. Ezekiel's vision invites us to consider what true restoration looks like, not just for a nation, but for individuals and communities as well. It's a call to openness, a reminder that even in our darkest times there is hope. But this vision doesn't end with renewal alone. The Valley of Dry Bones is part of a larger narrative that points to God's ultimate plan for His people. After bringing them back to life, God promises to unite them, to restore them to their homeland, and to establish an everlasting covenant of peace. This restoration isn't temporary. It's a complete transformation, one that goes beyond physical return and touches the heart of the people. For many, the Valley of Dry Bones is a prophecy that speaks to the future as much as it did to Ezekiel's own time. It's a vision that continues to resonate with those who seek renewal, both spiritually and as a society. In a world filled with challenges and uncertainties, Ezekiel's vision of restoration is a powerful reminder that God's plans are never defeated, no matter how broken things may seem. The Valley of Dry Bones challenges us to look beyond what we see on the surface and to trust in the possibilities that lie beyond despair. It's a call to hold on to hope, to believe in the power of renewal, and to recognize that, with God, nothing is truly beyond redemption. Ezekiel's prophecies take a dramatic turn when he describes an epic conflict, one that reaches far beyond his own time. Known as the Battle of Gog and Magog, this vision, found in chapters 38 and 39, stands out as one of the most mysterious and intense predictions in the entire Bible. It describes a future battle, a final confrontation between the forces of good and evil, a struggle that some believe will mark the beginning of the end times. In this vision, Ezekiel sees a coalition of powerful nations, led by a mysterious figure named Gog, coming together to attack Israel. This army, vast and fearsome, is described as descending upon the land like a storm, intent on destruction. But this isn't just any ordinary military conflict. It's a battle with profound spiritual implications. According to Ezekiel, this invasion is part of a divine plan, a moment orchestrated to reveal God's power and sovereignty to the world. As the invading forces close in on Israel, something unexpected happens. God Himself intervenes in the battle, unleashing a series of catastrophic events that decimate Gog's army. There are earthquakes, torrential rains, and hailstones, along with fire from heaven, all targeted at the forces that dared to attack His people. The result is absolute defeat for Gog and his allies, a display of power that leaves no doubt about who truly reigns over all nations. But what does this vision of Gog and Magog really mean? Over the centuries, scholars have debated its significance. Some interpret it as a literal prophecy of a future battle that will take place on Earth, possibly involving real nations and leaders. Others see it as a symbolic conflict, representing the ultimate struggle between good and evil, a cosmic battle that transcends any one nation or moment in time. The identity of Gog and the nations involved remains a mystery, with theories ranging from ancient empires to modern superpowers. The prophecy also touches on the idea of the end times, a period when forces of darkness rise up against God's people, only to be defeated by his intervention. This battle isn't just about land or power. It's about spiritual authority and the final triumph of God's kingdom over all opposition. In this sense, the battle of Gog and Magog can be seen as the climax of Ezekiel's prophecies, a vision that points to a future where justice is finally upheld. For those who study prophecy, the battle of Gog and Magog offers a challenging yet hopeful vision. It reminds us that even when evil appears to be gaining ground, there is an ultimate power that will prevail. In a world often marked by conflict, division, and uncertainty, Ezekiel's vision assures us that God's plans are unstoppable. No coalition, no matter how powerful, can overcome the will of the divine. The battle of Gog and Magog calls us to consider the forces at play in our own world, the struggles that define our time, and the spiritual battles we each face. It's a reminder that, in the end, there is a power greater than any earthly force, a power that watches over those who remain faithful. As we look at the world around us, Ezekiel's prophecy challenges us to reflect on where we place our trust and to remember that true security comes from aligning ourselves with the purposes of God. Toward the end of Ezekiel's prophecies, we encounter a vision that stands in stark contrast to the themes of judgment and destruction. It is the vision of a new temple and a river of living water, a picture of restoration and renewal that offers a glimpse of a future filled with hope and divine presence. In chapters 40 through 48, Ezekiel describes this new temple in stunning detail, a sanctuary where God's glory will dwell among his people once again. This temple isn't just a physical building. It represents a deeper spiritual reality, a place where God's presence and blessings flow freely. As Ezekiel walks through the temple in his vision, he sees a river flowing from under the threshold, starting as a trickle but growing deeper and wider as it moves outward. This river is unlike any other. It brings life wherever it goes, transforming the land around it and nourishing everything it touches. The river of living water symbolizes God's unending grace and his desire to bring life to his people. It flows through a barren landscape, making the desert bloom and filling the Dead Sea with fresh, life-giving water. This image of water bringing life to a dry and lifeless place is a powerful reminder that God's presence has the power to transform even the most desolate situations. For many, this vision of the new temple and the river points to a future era of peace and blessing, a time when God will restore his people and bring healing to the world. It's a promise of a reality where the struggles and divisions that marked Israel's past are replaced by unity, harmony, and a renewed connection with the divine. This is a place where the people no longer face exile or separation from God. Instead, they experience the fullness of his presence. Ezekiel's vision of the new temple also carries symbolic meaning for individuals and communities. The river of living water represents the spiritual renewal that God offers to anyone who seeks him. It's a call to allow God's Spirit to flow into our lives, bringing healing, growth, and transformation. Just as the river turns the desert into a garden, God's presence has the power to renew us, to turn our own deserts into places of spiritual abundance. This vision invites us to consider what it means to live in alignment with God's purposes, to be a people transformed by his presence. It's not just about waiting for a distant future. It's about experiencing the blessings of God's Spirit here and now, letting his life-giving presence flow through us and into the world around us. Ezekiel's final vision, with its emphasis on renewal, challenges us to look beyond the struggles and conflicts that may dominate our lives. It calls us to place our hope in the promise of restoration, in the vision of a world transformed by God's love and grace. The new temple and the river of living water are more than just symbols. They are a reminder that, with God, renewal and healing are always possible, no matter how dry or broken things may appear. As we close this journey through Ezekiel's powerful prophecies, one theme stands out above all: the role of the watchman. Ezekiel was more than a prophet. He was a watchman, a guardian for his people, given the responsibility to sound the alarm and to warn them of what was to come. This role carried an immense weight as he was called to speak the truth, even when it was hard to hear, even when his message was one of judgment. Ezekiel's calling as a watchman wasn't just about warning of physical danger. It was about guiding the people back to a path of faithfulness, urging them to turn away from sin and to seek God's guidance. In many ways, his role was one of deep compassion. He spoke out of a desire to see his people saved, to spare them from the consequences of their choices. His words were a call to vigilance, a reminder that true security comes from living in alignment with God's will. Today, the message of the watchman resonates just as powerfully. It challenges us to consider our own responsibilities, our own need to stay vigilant, and to be voices of truth in a world that often prefers comfort over conviction. Ezekiel's legacy as a watchman reminds us that we each have a role to play in calling ourselves and others to higher standards, to faithfulness, and to integrity. Thank you for joining us here on Sacred Path Reflections. If you found this exploration of Ezekiel's prophecies meaningful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Let's continue to uncover the truths and wisdom within these ancient texts together.